Velthor stood before the massive tribunal chamber, his three arms shaking slightly as he adjusted the translation device around his neck. The great hall stretched out before him, filled with representatives from dozens of worlds. All of them wanted to hear his story. All of them wanted to understand what had happened at Earth. The lead judge, a tall being from the Altarian system, spoke in a calm voice. "State your name and position for the record." "I am Velthor, former intelligence officer of the Nexari Collective, Fleet Division 7. His voice came out steady, but inside he felt the old fear returning. Even now, 3 years after the war ended, thinking about the humans made his skin crawl. "You were present during the entire Earth campaign?" "Yes, from the first day until ... Velthor paused, his large eyes blinking slowly. "Until we surrendered." A murmur went through the crowd. The mighty Nexari Collective had never surrendered before. Earth, they had conquered 17 star systems without losing a single major battle, but the humans were different. The humans changed everything. "Tell us about the beginning," the judge said. "How did your people see Earth before the invasion?" Velthor's memory went back to that day in the command ship. The massive vessel hung in space just outside Earth's solar system, hidden behind one of the outer planets. Around him, hundreds of Nexari officers worked at their stations, preparing for what they thought would be an easy victory. "We had been watching Earth for many cycles," Velthor began. "Our scouts sent back reports about the humans. They were always fighting each other. Small wars, big wars, it never stopped. Their planet was divided into many nations that hated each other. We thought this made them weak." The intelligence reports had painted a clear picture. Humans killed each other over small pieces of land, over different beliefs, over resources. They had nuclear weapons but had never used them to conquer their own world. To the Nexari, this seemed like madness. Any strong species would have united. Their planet under one ruler long ago? "Our war leaders laughed when they read about human history," Velthor continued. "They saw a species that wasted its energy fighting itself. We had conquered the Vectari in 3 days. The Zephyrins lasted 2 weeks. We expected the humans to last maybe 1 week. But there had been signs that some Nexari officers ignored." Velthor remembered reading reports about human space stations and colonies. Even while they fought each other on their home planet, humans had spread to their moon, to Mars, to asteroids throughout their system. For a species always at war, they built impressive things. The fleet commander, a veteran of 12 conquests, had addressed the invasion force with confidence. "The humans are scattered and weak," he had said. "When we strike their capital cities, they will surrender like all the others." Velthor remembered feeling excited that day. His first major campaign? And it would be over quickly. He would be back home with stories of victory in just a few weeks. He had no idea that he would not see home again for 4 years. The invasion began on what humans called a Tuesday. Velthor watched from the sensor station as their massive fleet dropped out of hyperspace near Earth's moon. 200 ships, including 12 dreadnoughts. Enough firepower to crack a planet in half. "We expected panic," Velthor told the tribunal. "We expected their leaders to call us, begging for mercy. Instead, we got silence for almost an hour. During that hour, the Nexari fleet had moved into attack position. They sent the standard surrender demand to Earth's governments. The message was simple: surrender now and your people will live as slaves. Fight us, and your species will die. Then the first human response came through. "Admiral Tejo of the Terran Defense Force," a calm human voice said over the communication channel. "We have received your message." Velthor had expected fear in the human's voice. Instead, Admiral Tejo sounded tired, like someone who had been expecting this day for a long time. "We will not surrender," the human continued. "All civilian stations are being evacuated. All non-military personnel should seek shelter. To the attacking force, you have made a mistake coming here." The Nexari command staff laughed at this message. What mistake? They had overwhelming force. They had superior technology. They had experience conquering worlds, but Velthor noticed something strange in the sensor readings. Human military stations. throughout the system were not powering down their weapons. Instead, they were powering up everything they had. Space stations that looked like simple civilian outposts suddenly showed massive energy signatures. Captain Sunmi of Seoul Defense. Station, transmitting on emergency frequency, another human voice broke through. This one was a female, and she sounded almost cheerful. We have maybe 300 people left on this station. Everyone else got out safely. Velther pulled up the information on Seoul Defense Station. It was a small outpost near Earth's moon, with light defensive weapons. Nothing that could threaten a Nexari warship. We know you can destroy us easily, Captain Sunmi continued. But we wanted you to know something before you try. This station has been rigged with enough explosives to take out anything that comes too close. And we're not the only ones. Across the human system, similar messages came from other stations. Civilian outposts announcing that they would fight. Military bases declaring they would never surrender. Even asteroid mining platforms stating they were ready for battle. The fleet commander ordered the first attack on Seoul Defense Station. It should have been over in minutes. The small station had only light shields and basic weapons. But when the Nexari destroyer moved in to finish it quickly, something unexpected happened. Captain Sunmi and her crew did exactly what they promised. As the destroyer closed in, the human station exploded in a ball of fire that caught the Nexari ship in its blast. Both vessels disappeared in seconds. The first human to die in the war took one of our destroyers with her, Velther told the silent tribunal. We should have paid attention to that. We should have understood what it meant. But the Nexari had not understood. They saw it as one lucky shot, one desperate act by a doomed enemy. They had no idea that Captain Sunmi had just shown them exactly how humans would fight this war. Over the next few hours, the pattern repeated across the system. Every human outpost, every station, every base fought until the end. None of them surrendered. When they were about to be overrun, many of them chose to destroy themselves and take Nexari forces with them. By the end of the first day, Velther sighed. We had destroyed every human military installation in their outer system, but we had also lost 15 ships. No species had ever made us pay such a price for simple outposts. The tribunal sat in complete silence. Velther looked at their faces and saw the same expression he had seen on Nexari faces during the war. The slow realization that something was very wrong. We thought the worst was over, Velther continued. We thought that once we reached Earth itself, the humans would see sense and surrender. We had no idea that everything we had seen so far was just the beginning. He paused, remembering the feeling of dread that had started to grow in his chest as their fleet moved toward the human homeworld. Looking back, he knew that should have been the moment they turned around and left. But the Nexari collective had never retreated from any world. That pride would cost them everything. Velther's hands trembled as he continued his testimony. The tribunal waited patiently while he gathered his thoughts. Remembering the second phase of the war always made him feel sick. We reached Earth's inner system 3 days after the first attacks, he began. Our fleet had lost some ships, but we still had massive firepower. The humans had a few dozen military vessels compared to our nearly 200. We thought the hard part was over. The Nexari fleet had arranged itself in standard attack formation. Their biggest ships moved toward Earth, while smaller vessels spread out to capture the human colonies on Mars and the asteroid belt. Everything followed normal invasion procedures, but the humans did not follow normal defense procedures. Major Jae-sung commanded a group of human fighters, Velther said, his voice growing quieter. 20 small ships against our dreadnought. Eternal victory, the battle should have lasted 5 minutes. Velther remembered watching the sensor display as the human fighters approached. They flew in no formation he recognized. Their ships looked like they were built from scrap metal, with weapons attached wherever they could fit them. Some of the fighters were clearly civilian vessels with military equipment bolted on. The dreadnought's weapons officer had laughed. "They're flying cargo ships against us," he had said. "This will be over before it starts." The first exchange of fire seemed to prove him right. The massive dreadnought's energy beams cut through two human fighters immediately. The humans scattered, but instead of retreating, they did something no sane species would do. They came closer. Major Jae-sung led his fighters straight into our weapons fire, Valther told the tribunal. They used their own destroyed ships as cover. When one fighter was hit, the others flew through the explosion to get closer to our vessel. What happened next still gave Valther nightmares. The human fighters, most of them damaged and leaking air, somehow reached the dreadnought's hull. Instead of trying to escape, they did something that shocked every Nexari on the command ship. They started boarding the dreadnought. The humans cut through our armor with mining tools, Valther said. Simple equipment meant for cutting rocks. But they used it to break into the most powerful ship in our fleet. The boarding action should have failed immediately. Nexari soldiers were bigger and stronger than humans. Their weapons were more advanced. The ship's security systems should have stopped any intruders in minutes, but Major Jae-sung and his people did not fight like normal soldiers. They fought like they had nothing to lose. They split into small groups and moved through our ship like they knew it better than we did, Valther continued. While our security forces chased one group, another group would attack somewhere else. They hit our engine room, our weapons control, our life support systems. The human boarding parties carried explosives with them. Not advanced military bombs, but simple charges that looked like they were made in someone's workshop. They placed these bombs in critical areas throughout the dreadnought. Valther had been monitoring the battle from the command ship when the communications from Eternal Victory suddenly stopped. The massive dreadnought hung silent in space for almost 10 minutes. Then Major Jae-sung's voice came over an open channel. "This is Major Jae-sung to all Nexari forces," the human had said. His voice was calm despite the sounds of fighting in the background. "We have control of your largest ship. We're giving you one chance to leave our system." The fleet commander had been furious. "You have nothing," he had shouted back. "We will destroy you and retake our ship." "No," Major Jae-sung had replied. "You won't." Then the Eternal Victory exploded. The humans destroyed our most powerful ship with themselves still inside it. Valther said, his voice barely above a whisper. 20 human fighters killed 800 Nexari soldiers and took out our flagship. They chose to die to hurt us. The explosion had been visible from every ship in the fleet. The massive dreadnought, which could have destroyed cities, became an expanding ball of fire and metal. The blast was so powerful that it damaged 2 other Nexari ships nearby, but the humans were not finished. Commander Haijin controlled the defense of Luna Colony, Valther continued. Our ground forces landed. They're expecting to find scared civilians hiding in their buildings. Instead, they found empty cities. The Nexari soldiers had moved through the lunar colony streets carefully, expecting ambush, but there was no one there. The buildings were empty, the streets were quiet. It seemed like all the humans had run away. We thought they had evacuated. Valther said, our soldiers started to relax. They began setting up control points and communication centers. That's when Commander Haijin showed us how humans really fight. The attack came from everywhere at once. Not from military positions, but from ordinary buildings, maintenance tunnels, even garbage disposal areas. Every human civilian who had seemed to evacuate was actually hiding, waiting for the right moment. They came out of the walls, Valther. Sahi, his eyes wide with remembered fear. Children throwing bombs made from household chemicals. Old humans shooting at our soldiers from apartment windows. Workers using construction equipment as weapons. The lunar colony became a nightmare. For the Nexari forces, every building could hide enemies. Every street corner could be a trap. The humans did not wear uniforms, so there was no way to tell who was a soldier and who was a civilian. Commander Haijin coordinated the resistance from hidden locations. Throughout the colony, she used the civilian communication network to stay in contact with resistance groups. When Nexari forces found one group, she would direct others to attack from behind. Our soldiers were trained to fight armies, Valther explained. But the humans were not an army. They were an entire population that decided to fight. Every human was a potential enemy. The battle for Luna Colony lasted 6 days. The Nexari forces had superior weapons and armor, but the humans knew every tunnel, every building, every hiding place. They appeared, attacked, and disappeared before the Nexari could respond. When reinforcements finally arrived to help the ground forces, they found something that shook the entire Nexari fleet. The soldiers they rescued were not the confident troops that had landed 6 days earlier. They were scared, exhausted, and many of them refused to leave their bunkers. Commander Hyjin sent us a message on the last day, Velther said. She told us that Luna Colony was just one small human settlement. She said Earth had thousands of cities and every one of them would fight the same way. The message had included video footage from the battle. Velther remembered watching humans who should have been helpless civilians working together like experienced soldiers. A grandmother teaching children how to make explosives. A shopkeeper using his delivery truck as a weapon. Workers in a power plant rigging the entire facility to explode. We had been in many wars, Velther told the tribunal. We knew how to fight soldiers. We knew how to occupy planets. But we had never fought an entire species before. The realization was starting to spread through the Nexari fleet. These humans were not like other species they had conquered. Other species had soldiers who fought while civilians hid. But human civilians were becoming soldiers. Our casualties were growing every day, Velther said. Not just from military battles, but from everywhere. A human engineer would repair our captured equipment, then sabotage it. A human translator would help us communicate, then pass information to the resistance. The fleet commander called a meeting of all senior officers. Velther had attended, as an intelligence specialist. The mood in the conference room was very different from the confident planning sessions they had held before the invasion. The humans are not fighting fair, one general had complained. They use civilian targets. They hide among non-combatants. They break every rule of civilized warfare. Velther remembered the uncomfortable silence that followed. Every Nexari officer knew that their own species had done much worse things during their conquests. But other species had eventually accepted defeat and surrendered. The humans seemed to be getting stronger the longer they fought. I started to understand something during that meeting, Velther told the tribunal. We were not just fighting the human military. We were fighting humanity itself. And humanity was much bigger than we had imagined. Outside the meeting room windows, Earth hung in space like a blue and white jewel. It looked peaceful and beautiful. But Velther knew that every continent, every island, every city on that planet was preparing to fight them. The war was just beginning. Velther paused to drink from a cup of water. His throat felt dry as he prepared to tell the tribunal about the worst part of the war, the part that still haunted his dreams. 3 months into the invasion, something changed, he began. The humans did something we never expected. Something that no species had ever done before. The first sign had come from the human news broadcasts. The Nexari were monitoring all human communications, trying to understand their military plans. Instead, they found something that confused them. The humans were talking to each other. We intercepted a communication between the leaders of human nations, Velther said. The President of the American Federation, the Premier of the Chinese Republic, the Prime Minister of the European Union, the President of the African States. All of them speaking together. This should not have been possible. Nexari intelligence reports showed that these human nations hated each other. They had been fighting wars and trade disputes for centuries. Some of them had nuclear weapons pointed at each other's cities, but now they were working together. The American president spoke first, Velther remembered. She said, "The time for human division is over. We have one enemy now, and they are not from our world." Then one by one, every human leader agreed. In a single day, the humans did what the Nexari thought was impossible. Every nation on Earth signed something called the Unity Accords. All their armies became one army. All their weapons became shared weapons. All their people became one people. Colonel Dongwu became the commander of the new Unified Earth Defense Force, Velther continued. He was Korean, but suddenly he Commanded American ships, Chinese soldiers, European technology, African resources. The entire planet was his to use. This was not how conquests were supposed to work. The Nexari strategy always depended on dividing their enemies. They would make deals with some groups while fighting others. They would promise rewards to collaborators while punishing resistors, but there were no human collaborators. There were no human nations willing to make separate deals. Every human seemed to have decided that they would win together or die together. Colonel Dongwu's first order shocked us, Valther said. He told all human forces to abandon their defensive positions on Earth. He evacuated entire cities, moved all their important equipment to hidden locations. The Nexari fleet had been preparing for massive battles around Earth's major cities. They expected to fight for control of human capitals, industrial centers, and military bases. Instead, when they arrived at these targets, they found empty buildings. The humans were giving us their planet, Valther said, but they were making sure we got nothing useful when we took it. Before leaving their cities, the humans had destroyed everything the Nexari might want. Factories were blown up. Power. Plants were sabotaged. Transportation systems were wrecked. Even civilian buildings were rigged with explosives. Lieutenant Bioram was in charge of civilian evacuations, Valther continued. We watched her organize the movement of millions of humans from their homes to hiding places throughout their solar system. The evacuation was not chaotic or panicked like the Nexari expected. It was organized like a military operation. Every human seemed to know exactly where to go and what to do. Families were separated so they could serve in different locations. Children were sent to safe areas while adults joined military units. But here's what we didn't understand at first, Valther said, his voice growing darker. The humans were not running away. They were repositioning for a different kind of war. A month later, Valther began to see what Colonel Dongwu had really done. The human refugees were not hiding in safe locations. They were spreading throughout the solar system like seeds, and each group was becoming a military unit. Captain Minho started broadcasting to our forces, Valther said. He was on an asteroid mining station that we thought was abandoned. His message was simple. You came to conquer Earth, but you never ask what happens when Earth decides to conquer. The asteroid station was not abandoned. It was full of human miners who had turned their rock-cutting equipment into weapons. They had built fighters from mining ships and bombs from industrial explosives. What looked like a simple civilian outpost was actually a military base. We found them everywhere, Valther continued. Research stations that became weapons factories. Cargo ships that became warships. Civilian colonies that became military strongholds. The humans had turned their entire solar system into a weapon. Every asteroid, every moon, every space station was now part of their war machine. The Nexari fleet suddenly found itself surrounded by thousands of hidden enemies. Our ships started disappearing, Valther said quietly. A destroyer would go to investigate what looked like a disabled human cargo ship. Hours later, we would find wreckage from both vessels. The humans were using their own ships as traps. They would make their vessels look damaged or abandoned, then attack any Nexari ship that came close. Sometimes they would ram their ships directly into Nexari vessels. Sometimes they would board the alien ships and destroy them from inside. We tried to avoid the obvious traps, Valther explained. But the humans made everything look like a trap. We stopped investigating disabled ships. We stopped boarding empty stations. We became afraid to get close to anything human. This fear was exactly what Colonel Dongwu wanted. The Nexari fleet, which had been confident and aggressive, became cautious and defensive. They moved in tight formations, afraid to spread out. They avoided large areas of space because they might contain hidden humans. Commander Yujin led the attack on our supply convoy, Valther said. We thought our rear areas were safe. We thought the humans were too busy defending their planet to attack our logistics. We were wrong. The supply convoy had been carrying food, fuel, and ammunition for the main fleet. It was guarded by 6 warships and was traveling through empty. Space, far from any human activity. The convoy should have been completely safe. Commander Yujin appeared with 12 human ships that looked like civilian freighters. The Nexari escort ships prepared to destroy them easily. But when the battle started, the human freighters revealed hidden weapons that were more powerful than anything on Nexari military vessels. She destroyed our entire convoy in 20 minutes, Velther said. 6 warships and 30 supply ships. Gone. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the message Commander Yujin sent afterward. She broadcasted on all Nexari frequencies so every ship in the fleet could hear her. "This is Commander Yujin of the Human Resistance Navy," she had said. "We know the location of every Nexari ship in our system. We know your patrol routes, your supply schedules, your communication codes. We have been watching you since you arrived." The message continued with specific details about Nexari operations. She knew which ships were low on fuel. She knew which commanders were having problems with their crews. She knew about secret meetings between Nexari officers. "The humans had been inside our communication networks from the beginning," Velther told the tribunal. "While we were planning our invasion, they were learning everything about us." Engineer Wujin had led the effort to capture Nexari technology. But the humans did not just study alien equipment. They improved it. A human engineer would take a Nexari weapon, figure out how it worked, then build a better version. "They started using our own weapons against us," Velther said. "But the human versions were stronger, faster, more reliable. They took our technology and made it into something we didn't recognize. The psychological effect on the Nexari forces was devastating. They were being outfought by an enemy using superior versions of their own equipment. Ships that had taken the Nexari decades to develop were being matched by human vessels built in months." "Major Yun-Young held the Kepler station with 300 soldiers," Velther continued. "We sent 5,000 troops to take it from her. The battle lasted 6 months. Kepler station was a human research facility on the edge of the solar system. It was not a military target, but the humans had turned it into a fortress that controlled access to several important trade routes. Every time we thought we had taken the station, Major Yun-Young would launch another counterattack," Velther said. "She used the station's research equipment to build new weapons. She used the civilian staff as soldiers. She turned every room into a battlefield. The siege became a symbol for both sides. For the Nexari, it represented everything that was wrong with this war. They had overwhelming force, but they could not defeat 300 humans defending a single station. For the humans, Kepler Station became proof that they could hold any position if they were willing to pay the price." When reinforcements finally reached Major Yun-Young, Velther said, "We discovered that she had killed more Nexari soldiers than some entire human armies. One station, 300 defenders. Against the might of the Nexari fleet, the tribunal sat in stunned silence. Velther could see the fear in their eyes, the same fear that had been growing in every Nexari officer as the war continued. But by the end of the first year, Velther concluded, we realized we were not winning. We were not even fighting the same war we had planned. The humans had changed everything." Velther's voice grew very quiet as he began the darkest part of his testimony. Several members of the tribunal leaned forward, sensing that something terrible was coming. "The second year of the war is when we learned what humans really are," he said. "We thought we understood them. We thought they were just another species fighting for survival. We were wrong. The change had started with General Sangwoo. Until then, human forces had focused on defending their solar system. They fought desperately, but they stayed close to their home. They seemed content to make the Nexari pay a high price for every victory. Then General Sangwoo did something no other species had ever done. He took the war to Nexari space. The first attack came at our forward base in the Kepler system," Velther said. 12 light years from Earth. We thought it was impossible for humans to reach us there. The Nexari base was supposed to be a safe rear area where damaged ships could be repaired and supplies could be organized. It was protected by defense platforms and guarded by a full squadron of warships. The humans should not even have known. It existed. Commander Eugen arrived with a fleet of 30 human ships. But these were not the converted civilian vessels the Nexari had seen before. These were purpose-built warships, designed using captured Nexari technology, but improved with human engineering. The battle lasted 4 hours, Valther said. When it was over, our entire base was destroyed. 200 Nexari ships gone. 10,000 soldiers dead. And Commander Eugen broadcast a message to every Nexari facility in that region. The message was simple but terrifying. This is what happens to invaders. We know where your other bases are. We're coming for all of them. Over the next 6 months, human strike teams appeared throughout Nexari space. They attacked supply depots, destroyed communication relays, and captured military facilities. Each raid was carefully planned and perfectly executed. They were not random attacks, Valther explained. The humans had studied our entire military structure. They knew which targets would cause the most damage. They knew which bases were poorly defended. They knew our weaknesses better than we did. Engineer Wu Jin led the technical teams that made these raids possible. The humans had not just copied Nexari faster than light travel. They had improved it. Human ships could now travel farther and faster than any Nexari vessel. We tried to hunt down the human fleets, Valther said. But they moved like ghosts. By the time our reinforcements reached an attacked base, the humans were already hitting targets in completely different star systems. The psychological effect was devastating. Nexari officers throughout their empire began to worry that humans might appear anywhere at any time. Bases that had been safe for decades suddenly needed heavy protection. Trade routes that had never seen combat required military escorts. Admiral Kyungmin was the worst of them, Valther said, his voice filled with old fear. She commanded the human deep strike force. She didn't just attack our military targets. She brought the war to our home worlds. The first attack on a Nexari civilian target shocked the entire collective. The humans struck an industrial complex on Nexar Prime, the Nexari homeworld. The complex was heavily defended and located deep inside Nexari space, surrounded by hundreds of military installations. Admiral Kyungmin bypassed all of those defenses. Her fleet appeared directly over the industrial complex, destroyed it completely, and escaped before Nexari reinforcements could respond. But here's what made it worse, Valther said. Before she attacked, Admiral Kyungmin sent a warning to all civilian workers in the complex. She gave them time to evacuate. She made sure no non-combatants were killed. This mercy was more frightening than cruelty would have been. It showed that the humans could strike anywhere they wanted, anytime they wanted, but they chose to limit their attacks. They were not killing Nexari civilians because they did not want to, not because they could not. She sent a message to our government after that raid, Valther continued. She said, "We can reach any target in your empire. We can destroy anything we choose. Stop this war now, or we will stop it for you." The Nexari collective had never received an ultimatum from a species they were trying to conquer. Other enemies begged for mercy or fought desperately for survival, but the humans were dictating terms like they were the victors. Our leaders refused to negotiate, Valther said. They ordered all forces to continue fighting. They said the Nexari collective would never surrender to primitives from a single planet. That decision doomed the Nexari war effort. Admiral Kyungmin's response was swift and devastating. Instead of attacking one target, she coordinated simultaneous strikes on 12 different Nexari systems. Military bases, industrial facilities, communication centers, all destroyed in a single day. The humans called it Black Tuesday, Valther said. In one day, they crippled our entire war machine. Not just the forces fighting at Earth, but our ability to wage war anywhere. Colonel Haewon led the occupation forces that followed these strikes. Instead of simply destroying Nexari facilities, the humans began capturing them. They took control of entire star systems, not to rule them, but to deny them to the Nexari. This is when we realized the truth, Valther said, his voice breaking slightly. The humans were not fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting to win, completely, permanently. The captured Nexari facilities revealed the full scope of human intelligence gathering. They had detailed maps of every Nexari system. They knew the location of every military base, every industrial center, every government facility. They had been preparing for this offensive phase for months. Major Insu was their strategic planner, Velther said. He had created a complete plan for conquering the entire Nexari collective, not just defeating our forces at Earth, but taking over our entire empire. The plan was methodical and terrifying. The humans had identified every critical system in Nexari space. They knew which planets produced food, which ones manufactured equipment, which ones provided strategic resources. They were prepared to capture or destroy everything the Nexari needed to function as a civilization. We tried to counterattack, Velther said. We pulled forces back from Earth to defend our home systems. But that just made things worse. With fewer Nexari ships at Earth, the human home defense forces became more aggressive. They began hunting down the remaining invasion fleet, destroying Nexari vessels one by one. What had started as a siege of Earth became a siege of the Nexari fleet. Commander Hyjin led the final assault on our command ship, Velther said. The same human who had defended Luna Colony at the beginning of the war. Now she was attacking our most powerful vessel with a fleet of human warships. The battle for the Nexari command ship lasted 18 hours. The massive vessel had been designed to be invincible, with the strongest shields and most powerful weapons in the Nexari fleet. But the humans attacked it with a coordinated assault that overwhelmed every defense. They boarded us, Velther said simply, just like Major Jae-sung had done to our first dreadnought. But this time, they didn't try to destroy the ship. They captured it. Commander Hyjin personally led the boarding parties through the command ship. Her forces moved through the vessel like they had studied its design for years. They captured key systems, took control of critical areas, and cornered the Nexari command staff. When they reached the bridge, Velther said, Commander Hyjin could have killed every officer there. Instead, she offered us a choice. Surrender now or watch the Nexari collective be destroyed system by system. The fleet commander had tried to refuse. He said the Nexari would never surrender to humans. Commander Hyjin had smiled and activated a communication screen showing Admiral Kyungmin's fleets attacking 3 more Nexari systems simultaneously. We surrender, the fleet commander had said. But that wasn't the end, Velther told the tribunal. The humans didn't just accept our surrender and go home. They kept coming, they kept attacking. They didn't stop until they had occupied half our empire. The conquest of Nexari space took 6 more months. Human fleets appeared in system after system, demanding surrender. Some Nexari forces fought. Others gave up immediately. None of them could stop the human advance. By the end of the war, Velther said, Admiral Kyungmin's fleets were orbiting Nexar Prime itself. She could have destroyed our homeworld. She could have killed billions of Nexari civilians. Instead, she had sent one final message to the Nexari government. The war is over. You lost. Now let's talk about what comes next. Velther looked at the tribunal members, seeing the same shock on their faces that he had felt during those final days. The humans didn't conquer us to enslave us, he said quietly. They conquered us to make sure we could never attack anyone else again. And that somehow was more terrifying than anything else they had done. Velther took a long breath before beginning the final part of his testimony. The tribunal chamber was completely silent. Everyone wanted to hear how this impossible war had ended. The surrender negotiations took place on Earth, he said. Admiral Kyungmin invited our government leaders to come to the planet we had tried to conquer. Most of them thought it was a trap. Velther had been part of the Nexari delegation. After 4 years of war, he was one of the few intelligence officers who had survived the entire campaign. His knowledge of human tactics made him valuable to the peace talks. When our shuttle approached Earth, I expected to see a dead world, he said. We had bombarded their cities, poisoned their atmosphere, and killed millions of their people. But Earth looked normal. The blue and white planet hung in space exactly as it had when the Nexari first arrived. The scars of war were invisible from orbit. Cities twinkled with lights. Weather patterns swirled across continents. It looked like a world at peace. General Insu met us at the landing port, Valther continued. He was the human strategic planner who had designed the conquest of our empire. I expected him to be arrogant, to treat us like defeated enemies. Instead, General Insu had greeted the Nexari delegation politely. He offered them food and comfortable quarters. He asked about their journey and made sure they had everything they needed. He treated them like honored guests rather than prisoners. This confused us more than their fighting had, Valther said. We understood human warriors. We did not understand human diplomats. The first formal meeting took place in what humans called the United Nations building, the same place where Earth's fractured nations had come together at the beginning of the war. Now it hosted negotiations between two galactic powers. Colonel Hay-1 led the human delegation, Valther said. She was the officer who had conquered half our empire. She should have been demanding tribute, slaves, territory. Instead, she asked us one simple question: why did you attack us? The Nexari delegation had prepared long speeches about their right to expansion, their superior civilization, their natural dominance over other species. But when faced with that simple question, none of those answers seemed adequate. We attacked. Because we could, the Nexari chief negotiator had finally said. Because we were stronger. Because that's what strong species do to weak ones, Colonel Hay-1 had nodded thoughtfully. And now we're stronger than you. Does that give us the right to do the same thing? The question hung in the air like a weapon. Every Nexari in the room understood the implication. The humans could destroy the Nexari collective completely if they wanted to. They had proven they had that power. But we're not going to, Colonel Hay-1 continued. Because strength without wisdom is just destruction, and destruction serves no one. The humans offered us something no conqueror had ever offered before. Valther told the tribunal. They offered us a partnership. The peace terms were unlike anything in galactic history. The humans did not demand tribute or territory. They did not take Nexari citizens as slaves. They did not dismantle the Nexari government or destroy their military. Instead, they proposed something revolutionary, a joint government that included both species. Representative Kyung-Soo explained their vision, Valther said. Humans and Nexari working together, combining their strengths, sharing their knowledge, not as rulers and subjects, but as equals. This was impossible to understand. The Nexari had conquered 17 species before Earth. In every case, they had either enslaved the defeated population or destroyed them completely. The idea of treating former enemies as partners made no sense. But the humans insisted, Valther continued. They said the war had taught them something important. Fighting each other was wasteful, working together was powerful. The negotiations continued for months. The humans were patient but firm about their core principles. They would not accept any agreement that allowed the Nexari to attack other species. They would not permit slavery or genocide anywhere in Nexari space. Ambassador Wu Jin handled the technical details, Valther said. She showed us how the new government would work. Nexari systems would keep their local autonomy, but major decisions would be made jointly by both species. The plan included protections for all the species the Nexari had previously conquered. Those worlds would be given independence and support to rebuild their civilizations. Former slaves would become free citizens with full rights. Some of our leaders refused to accept these terms, Valther said. They said the Nexari collective would rather die than submit to human mercy. General Insu had listened to these objections quietly. Then he had activated a display showing human fleets positioned throughout Nexari space. Hundreds of ships, thousands of soldiers, enough firepower to destroy every Nexari world. You can choose to die, he had said calmly, but you cannot choose to take your people with you. We will protect Nexari civilians from their own government if necessary. This was not an idle threat. The humans had already demonstrated their ability to strike any target in Nexari space. They had shown they could distinguish between military and civilian targets. They could remove Nexari leaders while leaving their populations unharmed. The final agreement was signed by Emperor Zarkin himself, Valther said. Our supreme leader, who had never spoken directly to any alien species, came to Earth to surrender personally. The signing ceremony took place in the same chamber where Valther was now giving his testimony. Representatives from dozens of worlds watched as the most powerful empire in the galaxy formally submitted to a species they had tried to destroy. But here's what I remember most about that day, Valther said, his voice soft with wonder. After the Emperor signed the surrender document, President Mit-Young of the Human Federation shook his hand, not as a victor claiming a prize, but as a leader welcoming a new partner. The integration process had taken 2 more years. Human administrators worked alongside Nexari officials to restructure their government. Human engineers helped rebuild facilities damaged during the war. Human teachers shared their knowledge with Nexari students. The changes were difficult for many Nexari to accept, Valther admitted. We had been the dominant species in our region of the galaxy. Suddenly we were junior partners in our own empire, but the benefits were impossible to ignore. Trade increased. Technology advanced. Scientific discoveries that would have taken the Nexari decades to make happened in months with human collaboration. Director Young-Ho established the new Research Council, Valther said. Half human, half Nexari scientists working together on projects neither species could have completed alone. The most successful project was the development of improved faster-than-light communication. Human theoretical knowledge combined with Nexari engineering expertise produced technology that revolutionized interstellar communication. But the biggest change was not technological, Valther said. It was philosophical. The humans taught us something we had never considered, that cooperation is stronger than conquest. 3 years after the war ended, the Human-Nexari alliance had become the most prosperous and stable government in the galaxy. Other species began asking to join voluntarily, something that had never happened in galactic history. This is why I am here today, Valther told the tribunal. Not just to testify about the war, but to warn about what happens when you underestimate humanity. He looked directly at each member of the tribunal, representatives from species across the galaxy, some of whom were probably considering their own expansion plans. The humans could have destroyed us, he said. They had the power, they had the justification. We had attacked them without provocation, killed their people, tried to enslave their entire species. Instead, they chose to save us from ourselves. They turned their greatest enemies into their closest allies. They showed us that there was a better way to live. Valther paused, remembering his last conversation with General Insu. The human leader had been preparing to return to Earth after the integration was complete. Valther had asked him the question that had bothered him throughout the peace process. Why did you spare us? Why didn't you just destroy the Nexari collective and be done with it? General Insu had smiled sadly. Because someone had to break the cycle, he had said. For thousands of years, strong species have conquered weak ones. The conquered become conquerors and attack someone else. It never ends. But if we could show that there was another way, if we could prove that former enemies could become friends, maybe other species would try it too. That conversation happened 4 years ago, Valther told the tribunal. Today, the Human-Nexari alliance includes 37 different species. All of them chose to join. None of them were conquered. He stood up from the witness chair, his testimony complete. The human war front was hell, he said. Not because humans are evil, but because they are impossible to defeat. They fight with everything they have and they never give up. But more importantly, they fight for something worth defending. They fight for the idea that all species can live together in peace. They fight for the belief that cooperation is better than conquest. They fight for a future where wars like ours never happen again. Velthor looked one final time at the tribunal members. If any of you are planning to attack humanity, don't.